Today's topic is Pre-Law 101, how to get accepted into your dream school. So today we're going to be covering creating a law school admissions timeline, earning a strong LSAT score, building a competitive resume, and securing strong letters of recommendation. Feel free throughout the webinar to put your questions in the chat. We're going to do a quick break halfway through and at the end just to go through your questions and answer them live. But just as a bit of a background on Juris Education. So we are a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm offering comprehensive support from test prep through law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. With a 94% acceptance rate, our students get into the top law schools in the country. And last cycle alone, our T14 acceptance rate was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%. So we believe in starting the law school application process as early as possible, which is why we offer pre-law advising and profile development. So this program focuses on building each student's professional cover letter resume to highlight their most meaningful experiences. We also help candidates to boost their academic transcripts and GPA, find stellar internships, research opportunities, and create a timeline for their LSAT prep. We have one goal, and that is to get applicants into their dream law program. Our private LSAT tutoring begins with assessing each candidate's strengths and weaknesses, and then this helps to create a customized study plan that's structured for your days, weeks, and months ahead. So we really tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with the test content, strategies, and format. So on average for our program, we see a 12-point increase for 45 or more hours of tutoring. And we offer a 165 LSAT score guarantee with our 60-hour program. So once we've gone through building the profile, preparing you for the LSAT, now we want to turn our attention to perfecting your applications. So this process includes developing a well-balanced list of reach, target, and safety schools, building your resume, securing letters of rec from the most effective recommenders, which we're going to be talking about today. And then our admissions counselors, who are going to be 2 of your hosts today, they are also essay writing experts. They've been through this process themselves, and they work closely with students to brainstorm, build outlines, draft, edit, and refine your personal statements and essays until they're exceptional. So at Juris, our goal is to transform promising candidates into standout applicants, and we leverage every tool and strategy to ensure that the applications we craft with our students shine above the rest. So we're so excited to support you through this process, and hope I get the chance to meet you soon on one of our consultations. But from here, I would love to turn it over to our presenters today, Tamar and Jesse, and I'm going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves and a bit about their background.
Thanks so much. So my name's Tamar. I use she, her pronouns. Just a quick blurb about me. I grew up in the Chicagoland area. I went to undergrad at Vanderbilt University, was a double major in English and gender studies and a minor in business. I took 2 years off before law school. I spent my first year as a Fulbright scholar in Taiwan and my second year as an AmeriCorps member in Chicago. And then I went to law school at the University of Michigan. So since then, most of my time has been spent doing child welfare and LGBTQ advocacy work. I'm now a law school professor at American University, and I'm really happy to be here and connect with you all. I will admit that I was not pre-law as an undergrad. I do not think you need to be pre-law as an undergrad. It is okay to decide after you graduate that you want to become a lawyer. So everyone and anyone can kind of benefit. Jesse, I'll give it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and I went to school at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Thereafter, I went to USC to get my JD MBA. And in total, between those 8 years, I was actually a writing center consultant. So I've been coaching and helping people with their essays for about a decade now. And I am just like Tamar. I didn't know I wanted to go to law school until my final semester of undergrad, because I took this this business law course that really inspired me to pursue further academia and to go to law school, because I really wanted to immerse myself in an intellectual challenge, as well as to my other ulterior motive, so to speak, was because I wanted to be taken more seriously and to have a more hands-on professional career. And I think law school naturally aligned with all of those intentions. So that was something that culminated towards the end of my undergrad experience. It wasn't something that I was planning on throughout. But I'm happy to be here and happy to share my experiences, as well as any insight I can provide from my time tutoring students with admissions coaching.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we will just keep kind of going back and forth. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and we will hopefully have some time at the end to get to some of them. So we'll start with creating an admissions timeline. This is something that I think we recommend for anyone applying to law school, not just folks at a particular time, right? It's really important. There's lots of kind of moving pieces in the law school application game. And so one of the first things to do is to get organized. And a good way to do that is to do that with reverse engineering, right? So if you want to start with your target law school deadlines, and then work backwards on when do I need to take the LSAT? When do I need to have my essay drafts to, friends and family who are going to edit them? When do I need to start writing those drafts? When do I need to be brainstorming those drafts? When do I need to be asking my recommenders to be my recommenders? All of those things are things that can be kind of reverse engineered. The only kind of thing I'll say about timeline, and I say this on all of our webinars, one of my least favorite things about this process is that it is rolling admissions. Rolling admissions means that you have a better shot of getting in the earlier you apply. So generally I say it is early to do it in the fall, anytime before Thanksgiving. That's generally early, although even the earlier the better, right? Between Thanksgiving and like New Year's, I would say is like pretty on target. And then anything after the New Year, I say you're getting on the later side. So at that point, there will be fewer seats. There is less financial aid money. There are fewer scholarships to be handing out. So I would not, if you're doing a reverse engineering of a calendar, I would not do it from the last date you could apply to law schools. I would do it from the date that you're planning on or hoping to apply to a law school, and then work backwards from there. And then you want to balance your applications with your academics. This is assuming that you are in school right now, or while you'll be applying. You do want to you of course need to have a strong application, but also you don't want to let your current commitments slip, right? Your current GPA matters a lot. Undergrad GPA is very, very, very important for law school admissions. You want to make sure you're finishing out internships well, so that those people can be recommenders for you, all of those things. You don't want to let go of, volunteer work that you've been doing or any other things like that. So all that to say, make sure that you are adequately allocating your time to all of the things, and don't just kind of fall off the face of the earth and all your academics and all of your hobbies and all of your extracurriculars just because you're starting to work on your law school application.
All right, so let's talk about earning a strong LSAT score. I think, the first thing you need to take into consideration when improving or upon your LSAT score or taking it for the first time is really just starting from a base of looking at the questions that you've gotten wrong on the practice tests and focusing on those. Taking a data-driven approach is really important, because the way that the LSAT is broken down is by different types of questions. At the end of the day, the LSAT is a standardized test. It's written by people, and it's about figuring out how those people want certain questions to be answered. And there is a strategy to it, and there are certain ways to approach each type of question. So data-driven approach means focusing on the questions that you got wrong and honing in on and really just drilling those types of questions in so that you don't make the same mistake twice. Another great tip is to simulate real test conditions, especially when you get closer to the examination time. Figure out, where you're going to be taking the exam. If it's going to be in person, where is that location? And, what would that classroom, if you can find out that information, what would it look like, and kind of try to simulate those circumstances so that you can, put yourself in a room without distractions, or with some distractions, frankly, if you're going to be in a group setting, and take a full practice test the same day of the week before the exam, so that you can get a real gist of what it will feel like when you finally take it, so that you don't get stage fright the day of and you're just like, oh my God, this is so abnormal. There are a lot of different mental tricks that you can do, having different rituals, like eating certain foods the day before an exam or something like that. Whatever calms your nerves and makes you less nervous, those are really good psychological tidbits and kind of details to keep in mind, because half of I think the difficulty of the exam really is fighting and staving off those nerves, staving off the anxiety, and making sure that you are in a good mental space to perform on the examination day. Because if you practice and you do great on the practice test, what good does that do if you kind of choke on the day of because you didn't prepare yourself mentally? So make sure you're taking care of yourself, and also being strategic with planning out when you're going to do that simulation of the real test condition. And then last thing is master high yield questions. So, focusing on mastering different types of reasoning questions that come up most frequently. Logic games, that's not on the test anymore, so I think that's a typo, but don't focus on things that are very, few and far between. Focus on the types of questions that will come up frequently on the exam. And here at Juris, we have great LSAT tutors that will help you and walk you through each type of question type and the different strategies to play for when you encounter them, so that by the time you take the exam, it'll be like muscle memory. And I highly, highly suggest getting a tutor, because learning from a book and learning from a person are completely different experiences. Everyone learns differently, so maybe you're someone that can learn from a book. I personally couldn't, even if I fought and tried really hard. I just couldn't. I needed a tutor to help me. And so there's a lot of people like that. If you're one of those people, please do seek out a tutor. We offer that service, and I think that that will make a world of a difference when it comes to preparing yourself and maximizing your score.
Okay, so advanced strategies for a top score. I feel like I'm repeating myself about how important plans are, but plans are very important when you are planning to go to law school, right? You want to make a study plan, and that can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people, right? I would try and think about what kind of studier you are. If you are someone who studies best in the morning, make sure that you are setting a schedule that is setting you up for success to study in the morning, right? If you are someone who, when I was an undergrad, my prime study hours were 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. If that is your prime study time, make sure that you are slotting in LSAT studying during that time, right? And you want to make sure that the time is structured in some sort of way. It's not just at the bottom of your list of things to get to. If you get through everything else on your to-do list, you want to be really consistently working towards the LSAT goal that you have. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you need to make sure that you're pacing yourself like it's a marathon, right? You want to try and avoid score plateaus as much as possible. So that means analyzing the questions that you missed, identifying what patterns you have, adjusting your study methods. That might mean, like Jesse said before, getting a tutor. Sometimes it's hard to see your own patterns. It can be helpful to do that with someone else. Make sure you're going through practice tests, using real practice questions, all of those good things.
All right, great. So let's talk about GPA. GPA is also, from the numbers point of view, in terms of the objective numbers that the admissions committee will look at. That's the second piece of the puzzle, the LSAT and GPA. And I think as a pre-law kind of student in undergrad that is prepared, if you're in the thick of it right now, and so your GPA is in flux, it's malleable because you're still in it. A lot of times when I tutor clients, they're already done with undergrad, so it's you can't even touch that anymore. But the good news is you're in it, so you have a chance to improve. So the first thing I want to say is, if you're an undergrad right now and you're concerned about your GPA, and maybe you're a freshman, sophomore, even if you're a junior, you can't change what you already have. Like, your GPA up to this point is what it is, but you can change what grades you get moving forward. So focus on, playing your cards strategically when it comes to selecting your courses, improving your GPA over time. All of those things are things that are within your control that you should focus on, not things that are in the past that you can't change anymore. And I know that I just want to mention that because I know a lot of the times people can get really caught up in their head and they're like, oh, I wish I could have gotten a better grade in this, bio 101 class, or like my chemistry final. I wish I didn't, bomb that. Like, yeah, I get it. That's totally understandable, but you can't change it anymore. Focus on what's in front of you. So let's dig into that a little bit more. Consistency over cramming. Develop strong study habits early on. Yeah, I think it's important to, like Tamar had said, figuring out a study schedule that works for you. Figuring out what makes you feel like you're the most productive and helps you. For me, that was, I used to be like a night owl, but then at some point my junior year of college, I think I just switched to being like an early bird, because I was just like, it's too painful for me to stay up too late, because then I just wake up and I feel miserable. So then I did this thing where I would wake up, I would go to sleep really early, and then I would wake up really early. And I did that for a while, and that, I think, was good. It was good for a while. Now I'm kind of like, I'm back to my normal habits. But you get what I'm saying, is that do what works for you. If you work better in the morning, put your study materials, like, ready your desk, so that when you pop out of bed, you can just get to your desk and do some work and get some really good productive hours in. Prioritize understanding over memorization. I think that is a key skill, because a lot of the times when it comes to whether it's like an essay-based exam or even a multiple choice-based exam, memorization can only take you so far. It's all about really digesting the material, and that will include, and that may necessarily include going to the TA or going to the professors during office hours, getting additional help, utilizing your school's resources. There's a lot of great tutoring resources that I think most undergrad offers, and I think there are peer tutors as well. I personally was a peer tutor for Chinese when I was an undergrad, and I think I went to peer tutors all the time for like my math classes, for my science classes. Those were really, really invaluable for me. And then choosing the right courses. Like, yes, it's important to like choose courses that you are very interested in, that you are excited about. You want to go to class and do it. Don't just take a course just because it's an easy A, because what if you actually like hate it and then you do really badly? Even if it's easy, sometimes easy is different for each person. Do you get what I'm saying? But I think it's important for you to also, as you develop throughout your undergrad career, to also keep in mind that GPA, if you're trying to go to law school, is incredibly important. And so that means that you need to be strategic in terms of how can you maximize your GPA at this juncture, what electives, what classes, and look at the curves too, and speak to your classmates, speak to people who are either above you who maybe took this class. They can tell you, like, this professor grades in this way or that way. Get insight and figure that out, because at the end of the day, like, if you can avoid getting a lower grade, that's probably for the best, especially when you're like, getting closer to graduation. The grades that you get your junior and senior year are going to be harder to explain to an admissions committee, because, if you don't do well your freshman and sophomore year, but you improve drastically, that's a great story. But if it's always up and down, or even if it's like trending downward, then it's like, it's harder to explain, because it's like, by this juncture, you should have already improved significantly and figured out a rhyme and rhythm to how you study. So just keep that in mind. Don't just take classes that you think are going to be like easy peasy. Like, do your due diligence and do some research into what those classes are, and if you're really interested in them as well. I think the interest part is very important, because law school admissions committees can see through inauthenticity, and what that means is they will look and be like, oh, you definitely just took that as a filler class, or you definitely just took a bunch of these different classes that are really have nothing to do with your major because you want to boost your GPA. So think about it, and don't think that the admissions committee don't see through things. So focus on interest as well as your ability to perform well in that class. And I think that'll be the right course of action.
Okay, so strengthening your GPA beyond the classroom. I know Jesse kind of touched on some of these things, but just to kind of double down on how important it is. Make sure you are building relationships with professors. I cannot emphasize this enough, especially if you're at a school or in a major where all of your classes are like 300-person lectures, right? You are going to need letters of recommendation from some of your professors. You will need to take it upon yourself to find ways to build those personal connections with those professors, right? I didn't even know this could be a problem for people because I wasn't, my classes were like capped at 18. And so I knew all of my professors. And then when I got to law school and a bunch of classmates were like, yeah, I was, a chem major, an orgo major, I'm trying to think, like engineers, right? Notoriously have huge classes. They were like, I didn't have anyone to ask. Like I didn't really interact with any of my professors one-on-one. And that can be really, really, really hard, especially if you're coming straight from undergrad or straight from school. The expectation will be that you have a number of recommenders that are academic. So make sure that you are very strategically meeting with those professors, getting to know them, making sure they know your face, asking if you can be their research assistant after the semester, right? Like come up with other ways that that you can be building the relationship even outside the classroom. And then manage challenging semesters. We all have challenging semesters. Hopefully you are on an upward trend, right? Like hopefully you got those challenging semesters out of your system like freshman year. But if not, that's okay. Just if there's an emergency going on or something like that, you can always think about working on an addendum for your application or talking to your juris consultant about kind of how to manage what a bad semester's grades look like. But also make sure that you're not giving up too soon, right? Like don't just call it in for the semester and be like, this is just going to be a flop of a semester. Make sure that you're going for tutoring, you're going and using academic resources. Think about doing those things early, especially if you feel like you're overcommitted at the end of undergrad or you're studying for the LSAT and you're doing your classes, right? Like your GPA is not the thing to let slip in this moment. Undergrad GPAs are very, very important to law school admissions folks. So make sure you're keeping that up as much as you can.
Thank you guys so much. That was some great topics to cover. And I just wanted to take this moment to check in with everybody that's with us. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I did want to let everybody know, we don't have the queue when you raise the hand, but I do have the chat open if you're able to type in there. So for any questions we don't get to today, or if you'd like a longer one-on-one session, we do offer free 20-minute consultations. They're available right on our website, or you can scan this QR code. It'll pull up the calendar to book a session. And then any of our programs as well, if you're interested in working with Juris Education for pre-law or app support or LSAT, you receive 10% off with the code right on the screen, 10 off web. So that's a great resource for you too. So I'm going to head over to the chat and see if we have any questions so far. Give people a chance to type them in. Oh, I love everybody saying hello. Let's see. So no questions so far. I know we usually get more at the end. This is kind of a big question. This is the person that raised their hand and said, a little vague, my GPA is messed up. So should I give up the idea of going to law school? And I'll let one of you take over from here.
My answer is no. One of my closest friends got into law school with like a 2.7 GPA, I think. Jesse's face is obviously indicating that is quite low.
Oh no!
I think you should hopefully have an explanation, right? Like it is helpful to have a reason. The reason might be I was an engineering major, and then the curve is really bad, and that is what it is. I will say the further out you go from undergrad, the less it will always matter, but it will matter less if you have a little bit of work experience. So you might consider taking a little bit of time off and really building up your resume in that way instead of trying to go straight through. But I think it really depends on the individual circumstance of like why it's messed up and kind of what your story is around that and how before we can give maybe more specific information. But Jesse, if you have any other thoughts, I'd love to hear those.
No, I totally agree. I think it's definitely, if that's your dream to go to law school, there's nothing that should ever stop you, especially, if you are, as Tamar had mentioned, I think going straight from undergrad would be a difficult endeavor just because, as you said, your GPA is not where you want it to be. And so by kind of increasing the gap between your graduation from undergrad to to law school, that'll give you some more time to kind of beef up your resume and give yourself time to figure out how you can explain this story to the admissions committee, because it really can be a case where your story resonates with the admissions committee, and that necessarily will, in many ways, allow them to see past or see through or understand better your GPA. And then also your LSAT, if you can improve that significantly, and it's a really strong LSAT score, that could also be a big plus for you as well. So focus on what you can change. Don't fixate upon things that are already done. Like if your GPA is already set in stone, there's no point in rehashing that. Just move forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great advice. And as you all were saying, there's so many factors that go into your profile between the experiences and LSAT and GPA and your story. So it doesn't just hinge on one single piece. But I think especially if you don't hold yourself to a timeline, there's always time to improve, right? A couple more questions we'll try to get to. One was, in general, how many months should be spent studying for the LSAT?
I think it just depends on how quickly you understand the material. Do a diagnostic test and just see how you score on it, and then go from there. It's really dependent on each person. I wouldn't spend like years and years on it just because I mean, I guess starting earlier doesn't necessarily hurt. I just want to caution people to not focus so intently on the LSAT, like really early on, like their sophomore, junior year, and then overlook or ignore other necessary parts of your application, like, finding internships or jobs or, working or extracurriculars. Like those are going to be important. So, people who think, oh, I'm going to just drill myself with LSAT all day for years on end and not do anything else. Well, you're not only are you not guaranteed to do well in the LSAT just because you spent a lot of time on it, you've also now kind of sabotaged yourself by not doing the other important stuff that your resume necessarily needs to be convincing and compelling to an admissions committee. So I think just take the diagnostic test, see how you do on that, and then speak with one of the LSAT tutors here at Juris and go from there, because it really is a case-by-case basis as to when to start. Tamar?
I think you nailed it. Nothing else to add.
Yeah, I was going to say there's just like a couple more LSAT questions that I could read through if you want to add on to that. So one person saying they already have internships on their profile, but now kind of have to choose between taking an additional internship or really buckling down on the LSAT. Would one be more favorable than the other?
I really think that depends on where you are in the process, what year you are, and I think there's a lot of factors. I don't think that just because you do an internship that should necessarily mean that you can't study for the LSAT, and vice versa too. I don't think that they're, unless they are one or the other, unless it is really mutually exclusive, then we'd have to have another individual conversation about that, and you can schedule a consultation to discuss that with us. But I think that it really, really depends. Tamar?
I think that's right. Yeah, I think a lot of these answers are unfortunately going to be it depends. So much of applications is like looking at them holistically and looking at what other pieces there are. And so we unfortunately won't be able to advise kind of on the individual level here. But I think what Jesse said is totally right.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. For anyone that has the more detailed questions, then we can get into now. That's where we'd love to, like the link that's up on the screen. If you want to book a 20-minute call, then we can look at everything you've done so far, what we have yet to be done, what year are you targeting applying, and we can just kind of do a more one-on-one deep dive. So would love for anyone to book a call. And we'll do one more question before we keep going and try to get to more at the end. Let's see. Oh, this one's easy that I can answer. Any programs that specifically help with the application process? We do. I would say our three main programs, pre-law advising, would be for anybody applying in 2026 or beyond. So if you're not applying in 2025, pre-law advising is going to help get everything ready, plan your courses, your GPA, build timelines, what experiences. It's a great place to start and build a plan. Specifically for the application, and if you are targeting applying in 2025 or just into 2026, like this upcoming cycle, that would be our all-inclusive application support. And we have different programs there depending on the number of schools that you're applying to. And then we have one-on-one tutoring programs. So not just LSAT one-on-one tutoring, but also bar exam tutoring for later on. So that's all on our website, all the different program options and pricing for you to check out. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have on a consultation call. So I am going to let our presenters go on to the next topics, and then I will also try to answer what I can in the chat for the rest of the questions. Thank you guys so much for all of the questions and engaging. That's awesome.
Okay, so law school selection strategy. Definitely, it's not all going to be about the prestige of the university. I think you definitely need to focus on what is your intention? What are you seeking to get out of law school, and where do you want to? Where do you see yourself working as an attorney after graduation? And if your goal really is, like, for example, there are a lot of people who come to me and say, "Oh, I want to do big law," and that's totally great. That's fair. A lot of people desire that, and I think that there's a pathway to achieve that without necessarily having to go to the most prestigious university. There's a lot of people that are able to make it through that pathway because they are they're gritty, they're resilient, but they also have good networking skills and they do well in law school. There's a lot of different factors that can contribute to you being able to get to that final destination or outcome. That does not necessarily entail the most prestigious university like Harvard or Yale. I think in addition to rankings, you want to also consider and be realistic when it comes to, for example, your GPA and your LSAT score. Where are you going to most likely be able to land based on those averages and those medians statistically, and kind of focus on getting yourself through the door of those match or even like slight reach schools, because that's really going to be where not only are you maximizing your chances of getting in and focusing on being realistic, but you also, maybe if you really refine your application materials, then you could get a substantive scholarship as well. These are all things that you want to consider. How much student loan debt do you want to be in after graduation? How do you want to reconcile that? Those are all factors that you should consider. So in the end, think about the data, think about where your LSAT score, where your GPA is, and think about where you want to go after graduation, what type of law you want to pursue, what region, what area, what part of America you want to be in. And then the last thing will be definitely what is the employment rate and the bar passage rate of the school that you go to. If those rates are really on the lower end, that it should be like a yellow or even a red flag, really, because then that kind of indicates that you're going to really struggle. Even if you were to finish the school and get the degree, if your chances of, based on the statistics of getting or passing the bar are like at 30%, there's definitely JD Advantage jobs out there. That's definitely something that you can pursue. But if your goal is to become an attorney and the bar passage stats or the employment rates are a very, very low, you got to look at that and take that into consideration and implement that into your calculus as to how you select your schools, because those are all necessary things. Just focusing on the name brand or the recognition or other kind of the fluff of it all. I think that can definitely distract you and lead you astray. Focus on what is concrete, what is in front of you, and the specific elements that I just mentioned. Those are the ones that you want to really hone in on when you're going through this selection process.
Crafting a standout personal statement is another important piece. I feel like all we keep saying is how important these pieces are, but really all of these pieces kind of work together to make a really strong application. So make sure that you are giving yourself enough time to write a strong personal statement, and truly any other essay, supplemental essays, any of the other kind of optional essays. I generally recommend writing optional essays as long as you're not a really terrible writer, right? As long as you're not like rushing and you're going to submit something that is really bad and would look worse to submit something than to not submit something, right? But all law schools are looking for a personal statement. You want to make sure that you're framing your application strengths and that your personal statement is really a piece that's speaking to the rest of your application, right? So they have already looked at your resume. It should not be a regurgitation of your resume. It should be something separate from that. It should be talking about, there's kind of a long list of what traditional things are, but like kind of if there's a reason that you're going to law school and a compelling story around that can be a really good topic to explore. Any moment where you kind of overcame something difficult or a moment that you're really proud of, those can be all great topics to explore, depending on what kind of stories you have. But I would really anchor your personal statement in storytelling and narrative, right? You want to kind of jump off the page in a way that you can't with the quantitative information that you're putting on your resume and on the rest of your application. So make sure that you're really, it's not super comfy, but you want to talk about like how you were feeling and kind of showing moments of vulnerability or what was going on in your head, because those are the things that you can't get in the other pieces of your application, right? You want to balance narrative and argument. So it's both a personal story and it also is a persuasive essay, right? You're trying to both leave the reader with an impression of who you are and also persuade them that they should want to know you. They should want to admit you to their law school because you will make their law school better, right? So you need to make sure that you are achieving both of those goals in usually a pretty small amount of space. Some of them, I think William and Mary this year capped at 500 words, which was wildly low. But most of them are 2 pages. Some of them will give you 3. Very few will give you more than that. So every word counts.
All right. So how can you make the personal statement memorable? I always, and I think the first bullet point really encapsulates this, I advise my clients to think about, starting in media res, which means in the middle of the action. It's like a literary term. So basically what it means is begin by really drawing your reader in a particular moment. And it could be like an unexpected event. It could be a very detailed explanation of a particular scenario or a scene, whatever it may be. It needs to be something that is like very vivid and attention grabbing, because that I think will immediately grab the reader's attention and then allow you to then get into like kind of the more I guess substantive portion of your statement and kind of zoom out a little bit. But leading with that attention grabbing introduction is a really good way to make yourself stand out. And then the logical structure after that will be to kind of explain who you are, where you come from, and what at this juncture in your life, what is leading you to, perhaps pursue this academic journey as a law student and what you want to do as an attorney. And then the focus really of your personal statement is going to be depth, a deep dive into who you are and what you stand for and what you want to do in the future. A lot of students have this kind of confusion when it comes to this, because they think that they want to add everything into the personal statement. They want to add everything that's on the resume and then kind of regurgitate it into like an essay format. And that is completely wrong. That is just not going to be what the personal statement is about, because if you go through it, that would be a laundry list of things that you've already listed in your resume. So what's the point of putting it in 2 portions of your application? You're just duplicating the information. That's not what it's for. focus on a particular experience, a moment in time that kind of was a watershed moment that kind of defines and has changed and shaped who you are today. It could be a moment. It could be a moment for any time, really, as long as you can tie it to your growth and your trajectory and your intention as to, if you can, it'd be great to be able to weave into a particular explanation of how you want to pursue a specific area of law. That is something that I kind of work with my clients to suggest at or point to, because I think that really gives the admissions committee an idea that you have an intention and a direction, and it's not just, oh, you want to do law school just for whatever. You actually have a basis of knowledge that you want to be able to leverage, and is actually priming you to really excel and succeed in a particular practice area as a practicing attorney. For example, maybe you're a bio or medical or a engineering background, or sometimes some type of STEM major, right? A lot of people with that type of background pursue area of law, of patent law, because that requires a technical degree. For me personally, I majored in business administration and Chinese language and literature, and so my personal statement pointed to my interest in pursuing immigration law. And after graduation, I actually did pursue business immigration law for a little bit and practiced in that area. And so those are just a couple of examples of how your background, your studies, and your story can align with and point to a particular direction. And that can just make it all the more convincing for the admissions committee to see that you have an idea of where you see yourself 5 years, 3 to 5 years from now. And I think that is incredibly important.
Jesse, I was so interested in what you were saying. I was like, what comes next? And the answer is I'm talking next. Okay, building a competitive resume. So your resume should be super, super clean. There should be absolutely no errors. That means you should have multiple people's eyes on it, right? Every period should be on purpose. Every bullet point should be perfectly formatted. That is, lawyers are notoriously type A people, and especially because admissions officers are seeing so many resumes, you really want to nail this one. It doesn't say anything positive about your application if you can't kind of pay attention to the detail on this. For the content, you really want to prioritize meaningful long-term commitments over a really long list of super short activities, right? So that's something to think about if you're an undergrad right now and you're building what you're interested in. I think a lot of people, freshman year are dabbling in a bunch of different activities. And then by sophomore, junior, senior year, you're really involved in just a smaller number, but you're on boards, you're on executives, you're just much more involved. That's kind of what you want to be seeing. If you're getting into sophomore, junior year and you still haven't kind of found your place, I would really think about, okay, how can I buckle down and find that place? Or what other activities can I do outside of school, maybe regular weekly volunteering or something like that, so that there can be something on my resume that's consistent. You want to highlight roles where you took initiative, right? Where you were a leader, where you were solving problems, where you made measurable differences. So you can include those differences in kind of the qualitative data that you put in your resume. And you want this to complement, like I said before, your personal statement. It should not be regurgitated in your personal statement. But it should kind of emphasize similar things, right? So if you're talking in your personal statement about how you really value working with underserved communities, right? Then that should be also apparent on your resume. Your whole resume should not be like working at Google at that point, right? Because then the two things kind of are not aligned. You want to make sure that the things that are in your resume make sense for the kind of personal touch that you're putting in your personal statement, and kind of vice versa. Again, they should not be the same in any way, but you want to make sure that they are complementing each other.
All right, so let's talk about letters of recommendation. I think the most important thing to consider when asking or selecting who to ask for a letter of recommendation is going to be, who knows you best? Who do you have the best relationship with in terms of your professors, and how has this person kind of shaped your academic journey? And, as Tamar mentioned before, that's a really important factor, especially if you're still an undergrad now, really foster and cultivate those relationships because they will be very important. For example, I had a really great English professor who I took a class with my freshman year, and then I continued to not only take classes with her, but also she was the director of the writing center, and she hired me as a writing tutor. So, that kind of, in addition to the academic, she spoke to my academic background, but also my professional background because she knew me in both contexts. So that was really helpful when she ultimately was the one to write my recommendation letter for law school. So that's one way that you can kind of foster and fortify those relationships. The second thing I want to say is I don't think that grades on their own should be the end-all be-all for selecting a particular professor or a letter of recommendation, because, and here's why, sometimes you can be in a class where there's 300 students. It could be like an intro class and you got an A+, you got like a 99% in that class. But if you never went to office hours, you never spoke to the professor, you never went to class, and you still got an A+ in that class, that professor, if you were to ask them for a letter of recommendation, ask yourself this: what would they even write about you? Like, what would they even say? They can't say anything because they don't know you. They just say, oh, this person did well in my class. I can't speak to anything further than that because I never had any conversations with them besides, when they came for the final. If that's the letter, that's a really bad letter. Even if you got an A+ in that class, that's not going to be something that the admissions committee is going to be like, oh, wow, I really need this person in my class. That's like, you were really lazy to have selected them. That showed poor judgment on your part if you were to select a professor who didn't know you and you asked a recommendation from them. So really prioritize depth over prestige. Just because a professor is super lofty in their position and they're like the chairperson of their particular department doesn't make them necessarily the best person for you to ask, because if you don't know them very well or they don't know you, again, they can't say anything. It's just going to be like a very flashy title, and then it's going to be like a one-sentence thing saying they were a student in my class. That's all I can say about them. I've had students ask me, oh, my family knows like this politician, can they write a letter of recommendation for me? And I'm like, did you intern for them? Did you work for them? Did you take a class with them? And the answer was no. I was like, then maybe that's not the person that you want to write your letter of recommendation for you, because again, as I said before, it will be a very vague letter, and then it's just gonna look really bad on your part. So just to sum up, focus on professors who know you, that you've fostered and cultivated a really good relationship with, and who can speak to your critical thinking skills, your writing skills, and speak to and kind of put a stamp on your potential as a future law student.
Okay, early decision versus regular decision. Early decision is binding, and you can really only do it at one school, right? That means you want to be really strategic about if and when you want to use it. You only want to use it if you are 100% committed to that school, and it does not matter what financial aid package that school gives you. For folks who are, either like don't have family that is supporting them or don't know where the money is going to come from for law school, or you have to take out loans, early decision is not always the best option and is not a super strategic choice. It also, compared to undergrad, it is a little bit less of a bump in your application. Law schools like to see that you're committed to them, but it is not as helpful as it might have been for undergrad admissions. If you are familiar with early decision for undergrad admissions, that is a much more substantial bump in the admissions process. So I would be really careful about using this. Schools do not look kindly on you applying early decision and then not going. That is not really a thing. And you don't want to be caught in a situation where you can't afford it, or you decided it actually isn't your top choice, or any of those sorts of things. Regular decision keeps lots of options open. It sometimes means you find out a little bit later, right? Early decision sometimes means you find out earlier, depending on when you apply. But regular decision lets you weigh multiple options. It often allows you to see what the financial aid packages are at those places. Sometimes you can play those financial aid packages against each other and get more money at certain schools. A lot of the schools have admitted students weekends, so you can go to admitted students weekend and see what types of other students were admitted and see if you would be a good fit for that school in that way. So those are kind of some of the regular decision benefits.
All right, interviews. 3 things to know. So different schools approach this differently. I personally didn't go through interviews. Well, actually, I was invited to interview, but to a school I was waitlisted at, but then I chose not to go because I committed. But I think when you are interviewed, it is really important to be able to speak to your resume, speak to your experiences, and make sure that your responses are not canned or too pre-rehearsed. I think, and that's something that I personally struggle with a lot, because whether it be a job interview or an admissions interview, I think a lot of the times we want to make sure that we're perfect and we know all of the answers, just like we're answering questions on a test. But it's not always about that. They want people who can think on their feet and also are genuine. And that genuine engagement always will trump a memorized response, because there's just that is the type of person that they're looking for. They want someone who is being truthful and honest about their experiences, and that who are not just a robot kind of spurting out and regurgitating information. So yeah, interviews are not just about answering questions. It's about how you align with the school's values, with their educational approach. If there are certain portions of, an internal script, so to speak, that you might have, like, make sure that they're like kind of bullet pointed things that you want to hit on. It's general points as opposed to like an actual script. Do you get what I'm saying? So what I think is important is, if you have certain portions of your resume or of your experiences that really kind of demonstrate how you would align with the school's values, or why you would, especially how you would add to the school's law school classroom and discussions, and make your experiences super valuable to the student body. If there's certain points that you want to hit, jot those down on a piece of paper and kind of rehearse that and practice with someone. Here at Juris, we definitely work with clients all the time, rehearsing for interviews and such, because that is a crucial part to not just law school admissions, but also in the professional world after you get out of law school as well. And whenever you're interviewing for a job, that's going to be the interviews never go away. You always have to be talking to people, and you always have to be cognizant of how you present yourself, how professional you are, how you appear, and how you present in front of an audience, whether it be an employer, a client, or an admissions rep. Those are always going to be in your orbit in this profession, and that's not something that really fully escapes. So just keep in mind that you're building upon a skill that you'll be using for a long period of time after graduation as well. So that's why this is super important to get the gist of now, and especially for if you're invited to interview for law school. That definitely also is a good indication that the school probably is interested in looking at your candidacy, because if they don't invite you for an interview, then you're obviously that's not a show of interest. It's a show of interest if they do want to talk to you and speak to you. So take those interviews seriously. Make sure that you don't just show up with memorized responses. Don't memorize everything. If you have to memorize something to feel a little bit less anxious, memorize the bullet points or the specific themes or topics that you want to hit generally, so that you cover all those bases. But don't memorize a script that is like verbatim from something that you wrote like in an essay format. That is not good.
Okay, and some mistakes to avoid. Applying too narrowly or too broadly can both be really not helpful. So too narrowly is only applying to reach schools, right? Too broadly could be, I think too broad is harder to define in my opinion, but you should think about what schools you would actually say yes to, right? So sometimes I work with students who are like, I'm going to apply to 35 schools. And I'm like, great. And then when we look at the list, it turns out that they would really actually only go to 5 of them. If they got admitted to the other 30, they would not be interested in going. So you want to be really thoughtful about, like, am I applying to schools that I would actually go to? And are there a good kind of mix of target, safety, reach schools, right? You don't want to underestimate the importance of proofreading. I cannot say this enough. Lawyers do not look kindly on spelling errors, on formatting inconsistencies, on submitting the wrong school's information, the wrong essay, any of those things. It is just a really easy way to think less of candidates. So make sure that you are checking and checking and checking. And also, I would get at least 2 more pairs of eyes to make sure that someone else is not going to be able to catch something that you missed, right? And then don't rush the process. It is okay to wait another year to apply. Law school's not going anywhere, I don't think. I think it is more important to put together a really good application than to just submit your stuff and, hope for the best. The years are, we've seen them be very competitive. They keep being very competitive. I don't see it being less competitive anytime soon. And so you really want to be able to put your best foot forward. And it's much easier to do if you've made a strategy, made a timing plan, can stick to that plan. And then if you need to adjust the plan, then that's okay. I would not make the plan be, I'm just going to wing it. That is not a good plan. Do not do that part. I think that wraps us up.
Thank you guys so much. That was so helpful. For everybody on tonight, these webinars and the topics are all based on your feedback, what you submit, topics you want to hear more about. So for anybody watching this, QR code just goes to a little feedback survey. We love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, and also any other topics that you would like us to cover. So please leave your feedback. We'll check it out and plan your topics for an upcoming webinar. Thank you so much. We have a couple people that scheduled a longer session. I tried to get to everybody in the chat that I could because these are amazing questions, but so many of them are really personalized, dependent on your profile, your experiences, where you are in the process, when you plan on applying. There's a lot of factors that go into it, as you can see just from tonight's webinar, all the different pieces of the puzzle that we talked about tonight. And we have a minute for Q&A, and Sam, I did try to answer your question, but I think he wanted to hear from Jesse and Tamar that he was saying, like, if he's at a 146.
I just put in a response. It's a very typical it depends answer, but it really will depend. So hopefully that answered it.
It depends on your schedule, how much time you have to put into the test, what type of materials you're using, how much time you can put into your prep. And that's why I said, especially if you're applying in the fall, maybe you have a little more than 3 months. But I just know based on our tutoring program, we definitely see those score increases with tutoring. Thank you for answering in the chat, though, Tamar. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm so glad you found it informative. Yes, thank you. Go ahead and schedule. It's up on our website all the time if you're not able to schedule right now. Would love to dig a little deeper into your questions. And thank you to Tamar and Jesse for walking us through the process. This was so helpful. Really appreciate everybody being here, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your night.